I'm Joel Gough. I currently am the business owner of a couple of yoga studios called Five Peaks Yoga in the Northern Virginia area, based out of physical locations. I've been living in the States for over 25 years, and the first part of my life I was living in England for 25. So I've split my life between England and America.
And you still have an awesome accent.
It comes through a little bit more sometimes when I'm in these kind of scenarios. I tend to slide into the American accent when I'm just everyday talking. But yeah, that's who I am. That's where I'm at right now. And you wanted to have a little chat about my journey with all these things, right?
Yeah. So tell me, so yoga, although it's much more than physical, what was your experience with your physical body before you got into any of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So growing up, the group of friends that I was part of in either in school or in the community that I was in, we were very active. We were out doing stuff all the time. I'm going to date myself a little here, but this is before the time of cell phones, right? This is before kids were getting cell phones at early ages. So any and all kind of sports, from tennis to golf to, obviously I call it football, but it's affectionately known as soccer in America. But you can imagine growing up in England, soccer was the main sport. But yeah, all of it, very active, running, bicycling, and I would surf in and out of whatever was the kind of like the sport of the moment. We went in and out of fads. Some seasons we were really into cycling, some seasons we were really into soccer or tennis or something. It was just whatever was popular, but very active and pretty fit growing up. Yeah.
And so your relationship to sports, it sounds like a lot of it was social,
Yes.
right? It's a
Yeah.
social aspect.
It was a cultural thing growing up. That's what we did in the evenings, on the weekends when we had free time. We would go down to the local playing fields and get together, team up and play games of soccer. Yeah, very social.
And did that follow you into adulthood?
Yeah, so it was interesting actually that so I came over to America around 24, 25 years of age. And when I came here, I got into a very physical line of work. I was working at a veterinarian clinic with
Mm.
horses. And my work every day was caring for horses, taking them out in the morning, bringing them back in, and being on a farm, a functioning farm, as you can imagine. It was very physical. That time I started seeing that I had like less energy for engaging in some of the sports I've been doing a lot more. I was very interested in basketball because I hadn't grown up playing basketball, but when I came to America, everybody plays basketball. So I wanted to try to get good at that. So that was the sport that I picked up when I came to America.
And so most of your activity transferred over to work. And as I know, you then entered the corporate world.
Yes.
So then what kind of happened? Were you able to keep up with it in your spare time, playing basketball?
No, not very well. So as those changes and shifts happened in my life from on a work level, I found that my commitment levels, my dedication to physical activity and physical fitness started to change. My attention and interest got very much into becoming kind of like a corporate person, like a career guy, right? Advancing, I got into sales. Working days were long, right? You know, you in sales, you can basically, my experience at least, is that you can keep working as much as you want to. There's a database full of thousands and thousands of people, and you can just keep going. And I got very interested in that. And so I didn't really have any time to go out to the gym or any of those things, even though there's a little voice in the head saying, hey, you should probably move your body. You should probably. So I would say for a good 10 to 15 years, I was not very physical at all.
Mm.
There's another factor in this mix as well, which if we can talk about if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and today I'm part of a recovery community, because what also manifested in my life during that time of, say, like late 20s into the late 30s was an addiction, you know, a huge addiction to alcohol. And that very much became a daily thing for me as I went through that decade of my life. So yeah, so as you can imagine, moving your body when also taking copious amounts of alcohol into my system every day. It's a losing battle. I remember thinking that was one of my, I wanted to employ this strategy at some point, that I was going to get up early in the morning and go to the gym so that then my evenings could be for drinking. I never seem to be able to get up early and go to the gym. Yeah, I wonder
A
why.
little, it's hard to wake up early when you're hungover.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I tried some of those skillful means, as I might call them. They didn't work out. The thing that had consumed me in terms of that coping mechanism for whatever stresses I was making up in my head I had in life
Hmm.
was to turn to that thing that brought some ease and comfort, which for me was alcohol.
Hmm.
And so that got first place, and then everything else got shoved out of the way. Yeah.
So Joel's priorities at this time were drinking and work,
Doing
is what I
some
hear.
work. Yes. And
So,
trying to manage some broken relationships along the way.
so with this kind of overcrowding and pushing aside these other things, just not taking care of yourself and the things that you needed to do to feel whole, how did that affect your personal relationships, your self-confidence, your self-efficacy, your belief that you could go out and do things?
Yeah, great questions. Let's take them piece by piece. So on a physical level, I'm still in my like 30s here. So the interesting idea I had was that, oh, I'm still young enough, right? This is not going to affect me. Plus, I see a lot of people around me doing similar things and they seem to be getting along okay. So there was a lot of self-deceit in that whole period of time. But what I couldn't deny was that I was gaining weight. All the excess calories and empty calories as it is from the alcohol. I think I gained something like 30 to 40 pounds during that decade. So definitely went to on a physical level to a place that was not healthy for me. It was not healthy for my frame. Relationship wise, relationships started to shift over that course of that time. I had quite a lot of close friends, either on a work level or in some in the community, and they started to notice, right? One of the interesting things I've learned in recovery is that the person, the sufferer, the addict, often thinks that he or she is hiding it really well. And that was certainly my idea, that I was hiding it well. But the truth often ends up being that people who were close to me knew what was going on and they
Mm-hmm.
could see it. So I started getting questions. I started getting concerns from people. And my response to that was to start distancing myself from people because I didn't like the questions about my drinking because
Mm-hmm.
my solution, what life. So anybody that was starting to get a little bit intrusive in that area of life, I started to distance myself from that person and I started to just try to hide it better. So the nature of relationships and friendships in that time started to change from close, caring, like healthy, I would say, to distant. And yeah, more, I was definitely being drawn into more isolation and spending more time on my own and not wanting to go to social gatherings and things. I'd started going through a divorce at the end of my 20s from the wife I married at very young in life. And so he left me on this place where I was single and dancing in and out of some partnerships through that decade, but nothing lasting and nothing that was anything that was close and intimate at all. So yeah.
It sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you focused on looking for these outside things, alcohol, work, to fix you and make you feel better, gave you like a very inward focus. If you're constantly trying to protect yourself and protect this thing, when you're showing up in relationships, how much can you really be a partner?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we learn in recovery as well, or I've learned, is that the basic instinctual tendencies in me as a human, the need for security, the need for some kind of social engagement, being part of a tribe, as it were, and some of the other like drives in life, they just get super amplified in addiction. And they get turned up, like the volume gets turned up to 11, right? And so they start becoming they started becoming something that was driving me in life. I didn't realize I was being driven by those things, and we could boil them down to very basics like fear, right? Like an instinctual fear that people are out to get me, or people are going to take something from me that I have. Along with that, then comes dishonesty, lying, the need to try to preserve and protect this image of myself by not telling the truth. Because then what are you going to think of me if I actually tell you what's going on? So, yeah, all that got amplified. And then that started to lead me to places that I didn't really want to end up.
Mhm.
That led me into breakups, right? Because another person wasn't enjoying their time around me, drunk most of the time, or recovering from being drunk, having big flares up in terms of my emotional nature that were really couldn't really be explained by any rational reason as to what was going on. But my relationship with myself on the internal level was really up here, right? It was the
Mhm.
thought system. So the thinking mind was just so out of whack. There was no intuitive thoughts. There was no connection to something bigger than myself, a higher power, as I call it today. It was all these instinctual drives and a lot of personal narrative between my ears about what was going on in life,
Mhm.
and not based in truth, based in a lot of story between in my head, basically. Yeah. So not a very good relationship internally.
Yeah. And so when did things start to shift? Did you have an aha moment? Was it something that happened gradually?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was basically out of ideas. I tried a lot of different things, like I'll go to the gym or I'll shift my schedule. It's interesting the different kind of strategies that I tried, and nothing worked. But then one day, it's over 10 years ago now, I think I had to get to a point where I was out of ideas for something else to be able to come in. And the simple idea that came in one day, not from me, was ask for help. And I'd not considered that before. It was like a news flash to me. I'd considered trying to fight more, trying to struggle more, trying to resist more, trying to hide more. Moving to a different state maybe was the answer. If I could get to Hawaii, that would solve it all. But this idea of asking for help was not my idea. And so, without trying to sound too woo, where did that come from? The explanation I lean on today is that it was of another origin, of a
Mhm.
higher wisdom, of a divine origin, and it
Mhm.
was almost like like an intervention in my plan that then shifted me into onto a different path. That started with going to a hospital, asking for, and eventually I was led to a recovery community, which really changed the whole course and direction of my life just over
Mhm.
10 years ago. Yep.
And as you got deeper into that recovery, what started happening when these other spaces in your life opened? Once you took the alcohol out, what did you
Yeah.
fill that hole with?
Yeah, just imagine like that I'd been taken to a place where I basically didn't have any friends other than a group of maybe drinking buddies,
Mhm.
some work colleagues, and that was it. And now I've been led into a community that has very well established with lots of people at various stages of recovery, different times of years of sobriety, and I'm thrust into that environment. And suddenly I start getting people coming up and asking how I'm doing, and do I want to come out to get coffee after getting together for a meeting or something. And that starts to change. It's almost like the way I see it is like the flower of Joel was in a really small pot with bad soil, not getting any sunlight and no water. And then
Mhm.
suddenly that plant or that flower was put in a much bigger pot with good soil. The window started to open, sunlight and water started to come in, and the flower started to change. And that's what happened when I allowed myself just to be told what to do. This community that was a lot more established than I was and seemed to be doing a lot better than I was.
Mhm.
And that was a new direction. And that's something I never thought was going to happen. So, as we say in the community, I got on the operating table and I didn't try to pick up the scalpel or tell the doctor what to do. And I just laid there and allowed the the path that had been laid before me to unfold. And it just meant taking some simple directions and following some suggestions and doing some different actions, and and things started to change.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then this shift from drunk Joel to recovered Joel to 500-hour registered experienced yoga teacher, multiple studio owner. Where was the first seed of that planted? And I ask because I think a lot of people think, just like you did, if I can just get to the gym, right? If I can just do this thing, then I'm going to figure everything out. Versus you, it was such a bigger mindset shift that had to happen first before you had the space to incorporate these other things.
Yeah, this is a great question. If you'd asked me in that first month or two of sobering up and coming into a recovery community to write down a list of the things that I maybe hoped would happen in life, I can tell you with certainty that I would have short sold myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have probably said, it'd be nice if I could keep my job.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if I could have a few friends that aren't trying to steal money from me or don't care about me. But what started to happen was when I submitted myself to this kind of higher authority, right, the higher power or something divine, and allow and just get myself out of the way enough, it seems like it had a lot of different plans in mind for me. And where things started to unfold was about 4 years into recovery. I very much wanted, it was not very altruistic what brought me to a yoga mat, right? There was a really lovely lady who I wanted to spend more time with. I was very interested in her company, and she invited me to go to a yoga class with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I said yes. Now, that didn't work out in terms of the relationship with her, but what happened in that, it wasn't my first class by any means, but I kept going. And then the studio that I was going to, they had this like month challenge that was coming up. It was like turning into a new year. And I at this time I'm still like conscious of the body and like I'm a little overweight and things like that. And I'm like, and I said to one of the teachers, what could really change in a month? And she said to me, she said, why don't you do it and find out? Again, like recovery, right? Where I had doubt and skepticism coming into recovery. What could this path of recovery do for me?
Mm-hmm.
What can these steps do for me? And then it's, why don't you do what they say and find out, have your own experience? So I just applied the principle of recovery to yoga. And I said, okay, I'll try to go every day and let's see what happens. And during that month, I think I practiced and got to the mat about something like 25 or so times in the month. And so I started to have some experiences. Some of the experiences on the mat were releases, like either crying.
Mm-hmm.
Some were just starting to have a bit more awareness of the body. And that during classes, I started to notice that there was a lot less going on in the thought space and a lot more just kind of presence to what was going on in the class, listening to the instructor, trying to make a shape, move from one to the other, notice the breath, stay on the breath, keep coming back to the breath. And so these started to have some experiences, and it was enough to, the hook was in the fish's mouth at that point. I was like, oh, this feels very similar to recovery in terms of there are practices and principles here in yoga to follow. I'm curious about that. Let me keep going and seeing what's on off, what more there is here. And so that's how recovery and yoga started working in tandem for me in my life at that point. And that's been about 7 years I've been practicing yoga now. You want to get to where the whole 5 peaks thing comes in eventually.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yes. So I started seeing, like with all with all like wisdom traditions and spiritual practices, is that there's different levels that a person can dip their toe into that, right? Or you can actually jump in and just dunk yourself in those practices because they're so deep and rich. And so I'm going to classes and I'm learning a lot about asana, which is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. And I'm learning about breath, and I'm seeing that there's more to learn. I hear teachers talking about sacred texts and quoting from them. And then I started to hear that there was this thing called teacher training that a lot of studios offer on a year-to-year basis. And I started getting very curious in that. I was ready to start a teacher training program. And then we had a little world event happen that was called a pandemic back in 2020. So that kind of hit the pause button for me on that. But then I committed to starting that in 2021. And I did in a new studio that I'd become a member of in 5 Peaks. And I enrolled with the owner and lead teacher there. And I went on 2 years of intense training and study into the yogic tradition. And I had no clue where that was leading me. But during those couple of years, I had got to a point where I was not enthusiastic or passionate anymore about continuing a job in the kind of the corporate world, what I was doing. I saw that shift had happened inside of me. And so I started putting it out there as an intention. We talk about intention in yoga being very important to that my higher power or the universe, whatever you relate into. And I was saying, look, I would love to be of more service in life, doing something that I'm very passionate about, which is now yoga, the practicing and the passing on of the teachings and being of service to others. And it so came about that at the end of 2023, the owner, due to a move with her family to another state, came to me and approached me and asked me if I wanted to purchase and buy the business. So that's how the universe responded to that intention. And I was ready at that point because I had the intention to pretty quickly say yes. And now we're about what, almost a year and a half into it. The owner, I appreciate you as well being part of the community and coming and practicing with us. And so that's what leads us up to today. Yeah.
And big shout out to Five Peaks, because I do think it's special, what you guys are doing there. Not every yoga studio does such a great job of bridging the yogic traditions and the asana practice. So I know that's something I really appreciate about the studio and the community. Everybody's so nice and welcoming. But I think that something else that you mentioned, or that your story was thread through, that I think is so valuable of an experience, this is what I experienced too, was, and I think a lot of people will start a fitness journey, and they, just like when they try to find like a higher power, and they think it needs to be very finely defined and put into a box of, this is what it's going to be. I'm doing this, instead of going on this winding journey. And I saw this video or whatever on Instagram, and it was a woman, it was a teacher, and she, on one side, she said, do not know. And on the other side, it was no. And she was like, everybody thinks this is just like a straight line, but it's like this.
Yeah.
And how you arrive to where you are now, so far away. I mean, football playing, basketball playing, and drunk workaholic Joel would have never probably thought that you would even be interested in owning a yoga studio or dipping this far into the study of it.
No idea. I had
Mhm.
no idea.
And that
Yeah.
was my experience too. When I started my year-long personal training school, I didn't know what I was going to do with that. I thought maybe I would write blogs or something on
Yeah.
the side. But then you just take that step forward. Like you said, you just start, just like with recoveries. We'll see how this goes,
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of, this is how this is going to go.
Right. So it goes contrary to the kind of reasoning or rational logical mind to place myself under the care of something that I don't necessarily understand or have any idea where I'm going to be led, but there's some faith and some trust involved that, hey, yes, I've been given a little bit of evidence that it's working out much better than me having the steering wheel of my life. And then the question just becomes, how much can I expand on that? How much can I owe this power, this loving higher power was able to help me with this thing I never thought I was ever going to break free from, which was drinking every day. And it did that. And then it's, what else can it do for me if I just allow it to guide? And that to me is, then I can start getting involved with that through intention and vision, these tools and practices that we learn. And whoever listens to this, I had put in my intention that I wanted to transition and do something different with my secular work 3 years before the conversation
Mhm.
to purchase the yoga studio. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like overnight, right?
Mhm.
Because Joel wants quick returns on my
Mhm.
ideas, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes it takes time. So that to me, don't pause to start working with intention and vision in your life.
Right.
Sooner you start working with that, then manifestation can happen when right action is taken in accordance with it. So yeah, it's
Has
good.
there has there been anything along your journey, like when you in our recovery program, right? The founders, their intention wasn't what that community is today. Their intention was to do something completely different, and then something else manifested. So along your journey, was there something that you were like, I'm going to get this yoga certification and I'm going to do this, that you ended up doing something completely different, but for the better? Was there anything that did not go as planned? Thank God.
Is there anything that didn't go as planned? I'd started dropping the plans a little bit, to be honest.
Mhm.
I didn't have an intention that was super specific in that I was going to be like just like a personal instructor, like some of the work that you do, where you work one-on-one, and I'm going to have this certification to teach yoga, and I'm going to do it on the side. I was just open to whatever. And then I know in the fitness world, right, and this world, that if for friends who are trying to make it in this world, it's not simple, right? It's to go and work for a company and to have a job where you get a salary, the cost of living is a lot these days. So to go out on your own is quite a task, and it takes a lot of courage to do it. So I didn't know how that was going to work out. What I did, the actions that I knew I could take was to stay in my training, to continue being a student, to make myself available to opportunities that may have arisen, and so just to keep doing those things.
Mhm.
And then it became presented to me. This, yeah. I no, it wasn't really that I had any other plan. I was just open to whatever was going to come. I trusted that something was going to come. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to somebody that's thinking about starting yoga, or starting some kind of physical practice for whatever reason that they may have? What's some advice you would give them?
Yeah. Just start, right? And don't worry too much about the reason, right?
Mhm,
If it's the, oh, I don't feel good in my body, right?
mhm,
I really feel like I need to move my body and to sweat and to, it doesn't have to, like my path, right? It doesn't have to be some altruistic or big, I want to get connected to God, or
mhm,
just start. And if
mhm,
you don't know, just give it a try. Most yoga studios, including ours, have very reasonable intro offers where you can just jump in and grab a little pass for a week or two and just dip your toe in and see how you might, what your experience might be. I'm not here to say that it's yoga. It might be some other form of physical movement. I know a lot of people that connect in terms of moving meditations through various different physical activities. Some it's running, some it's skiing, some it's biking. So it's, there might be something for you out there that really lands. It might be yoga. Try it. What I love about yoga is that it is also a wisdom tradition. It's a spiritual practice. And so it's not just about the body, about the Western world has taken it a little bit and shaped it, but its roots are in connecting to something bigger than ourselves, connecting to a truth that is maybe something we hadn't considered before. And the practices within it, the asana is just one of them, is to really, I see it, is to help drop us from our thinking mind into our heart. And if we can make that journey, it doesn't seem very far, but I think it's probably one of the furthest journeys anyone ever makes in life. Maybe something else will open up.
mhm,
Yeah. And then the relationship with my physical body, the vessel that I'm in for this life, can change.
mhm,
It is part of it now, but it is no longer something that consumes my every thought all day long. Like, I don't like it. I'm not comfortable in it. I don't like the way I look. No,
mhm,
I have a good relationship with my body today.
mhm,
The waves like everybody else does, with sometimes feeling a little better or not so great in it any day, but it's not earth. The physical practice helps, at least gives me confidence that I am doing something that is good for my body every day. Breathe in it, sweat. Yeah, you know,
use it.
yeah, keep it maintained, as it were. And
Mhm,
that's that yoga offers a holistic practice, right? I'm going to move every single part of my body at some point in a yoga class. I am also going to be called into some kind of presence. and I'm going to be given a little bit of time at the end of it to rest and just let it all soak in. So yeah, just start. And if you've been, if you're in the, in, if you're a yoga practitioner and you've been doing it for a while and you go to classes regularly, maybe consider pulling the thread a little more on curiosity and finding out what else might be there is to learn, because it's really, it's so vast. It's, I haven't scratched the surface of it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's always going to be more to learn.
Yeah, and then the last piece of the puzzle for me in life has been the attitude of service,
Mhm.
and along with gratitude for what I have, but also the service to, in some way, shape, or form, be in service to this thing that has done so much for me that I can't even, there's no way I can compensate and repay that. But what I see is mainly asked of me is to be available to pass it on, right? To
Mhm.
let something maybe pass through that would be of help to another person, and staying in a community where I can then be involved in that and be available to others, whether it's the teachers that are part of our studio, whether it's the students that are part of our community, whether it's the outreach that we do in the community to take events out. That is so fulfilling.
Mhm.
I don't know, there's nothing that a drink can do for me today, which is a really great place to have been taken to from where I was just over 10 years ago. And so all of that seems to be fulfilling what was needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy because I think that when I was drinking, definitely was not exercising. When I wasn't, I was never filling my cup. I was just trying to protect what I had. I really didn't have a lot to give. And it's funny because I think when you start these self-care practices, sometimes it feels like you're being selfish, like that I'm taking this time to go do this, that I'm going to make this decision and instead of that one. It can feel selfish, but I feel like I have so much more to give because I take care of myself, because I prioritize that time and I set boundaries on it, on my taking care of my physical self, on taking care of my mental self, on taking care of my spiritual self, on taking care of my social self. Because I protect that time for those things, I have more in my cup to pour into other people.
Yep.
And if I don't feel like I have as much, that's usually time for me to look back and be like, am I doing all the things that I know I need to do to keep this stuff in balance?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's the spirit of staying a student, right?
Yeah.
About another suggestion is, and there's something that was given to me from my teacher, is always stay in the spirit of being a student, no matter how many times I might actually be teaching a class or passing something on.
Mhm.
If I
Mhm.
can keep that balance of, but I'm always a student. I'm
Mhm.
always open, and I always, my intention is to be open and receptive, stay curious. These are just basic principles of any wisdom practice.
Mhm.
And then it seems to, what that seems to do is create a flow, a flowing in, a receptivity, and then a passing through and a flowing out. And
So motivation is on a spectrum. We have extrinsic motivation. I want to do this thing because I want the body, or I want to do this
right,
thing because I want to lose weight. Then we have intrinsic motivation, which is like, I do this because I have joy in the pursuit.
yeah,
But what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot of space in between those two things. We can go from extrinsic to identified, whereas I'm going to engage in this yoga practice or this physical practice so that I'm going to get this thing later.
yeah,
And then it's becomes part of our identity and it's more integrated, where I do this thing because it aligns with my values. I do this because I am somebody that takes care of themselves, and somebody that takes care of themselves does this thing. And then we start to get more into that more intrinsic, that pursuit of mastery. And I love things like yoga, and I love things like yoga is not an exercise class, period. It is something you can master. It is a pursuit of something, whether it's a certain shape or maybe it's a certain principle that you're trying to master. There's so much richness that you can dive into and work on, and that find that winding road. It's not just showing up and burning a bunch of calories, that you're selling yourself so short if that's the primary focus. That might get you in the door,
yeah,
but where it starts becoming a joyful experience that can motivate you and get you to show up even when you don't want to,
Yeah.
is that pursuit of mastery, like you said, staying teachable.
And I haven't met any experience or situation, circumstance in life where there isn't an accompanying message and teaching available on the yoga mat,
Mhm.
right? So when I need, for example, say I need some faith and some patience to walk through a particular trying circumstance in my life, I'm going to be met with a pose on the yoga mat that is likely asking me into some faith and patience, right? I'm
Mhm.
not going to be able to get it right away. It's going to challenge me, but I can also have faith that if I keep coming and I try a little bit each day, and so the less, so it's all interwoven. Because you could ask the question, how practical is picking up a yoga practice for all the real stuff we have to deal with in life? I'm here to say it's extremely practical.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
absolutely interconnected. The lessons, the principles that we learn and get to practice in a yoga class directly correlate to anything anything that I would need to walk through in life.
Mhm.
And that's a pretty good activity to be involved in, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, good stuff.
it's definitely part of my cup filling.
Yeah.
I need to get my butt in there regularly. Oh, great. Anything else you want to
This
touch
has
on,
been
or did we cover
wonderful.
everything?
I appreciate you asking me, inviting me. The conversation, the discussion has been amazing. This is the stuff I get excited about these days that I'm passionate about.
Mhm.
And the recovery side, I always like to just extend this to anyone that might be listening to it that is in a place where they don't necessarily want to be right now. Please know that there are communities out there and you can ask for help.
Mhm.
And then for anyone who's curious about yoga, there are wonderful studios in our area, including Five Peaks, our own, and others, where you can just dip your toe in and try something and see where it goes. So
Mhm. Mhm. Love it.
put our contact info in for people to be able to find us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Beth.
Well, so much. I'll
Yeah,
see you around.
bye.
Bye.